When I was 8 years old, I knew I wanted to work in TV. Then later on, here comes my big break. I was hired as the first traffic reporter for WVEC. I loved that job. We saw the sunrises in the morning. We saw the sun sets at night. We were there for breaking news. It was everything I had always wanted as a journalist. Then one day I come to work, it's going to be a storm, so I come early, and afterwards I have a meeting with my general manager. I go upstairs and I see him, and before I can even sit down, he says, "Benita, I hate to have to tell you this, but we are going in a new direction. Today's your last day." Now, I couldn't even believe that. How could that happen to me? And I said, "I can't go with you in this new direction?" He said, "Absolutely not." Not only was I surprised, I was angry and I was hurt. So now I decided that as a woman in my second act, I want to help other second act women go through their midlife journey of reinvention and transformation, because I'm a woman in transition and I want to help you get there too. What I'm so excited about, and we've been talking about this a little bit, is life, possibilities, future expectations. And so when I asked you to be on the second act and talk about self-reflections, lessons learned, what would I tell my younger self?
You know, I've been thinking about that, and it's interesting that you asked that question, because recently we were asked to go look through some old photos and find our younger self. And I came across this photo of myself on my 30th birthday, and I was celebrating at the Duck Inn in Virginia Beach, and I remember that point in time in my life and all of the possibilities that lay ahead. And you know, my career was right there out in front of me, and you know, what would I say to my younger self? You know what? I wouldn't change a thing. That's the most wonderful part about it, because at that point in time I was determined. There was no stopping me. I had all the confidence in the world. I don't know why. And I just thought that, you know, if they would just see what I saw in me, then there would be no roadblocks. But there were. There were plenty of roadblocks. There were people, there were issues, there were lots of obstacles that stood in the way of my achieving many of my goals. But, you know, the grit and determination that was in that young lady, would I say anything to her differently? Heck no, I'd get out of her way.
Wow, I love that. Why journalism?
Well, I think that it was something that was a dare. That's where it started, because, well, Benita, you know, I grew up at a time where, talk about old school, it was junior high at the time.
It was junior high. It wasn't middle school.
Junior high.
It really was junior high, yes.
And in my junior high, Knoxville Junior High in Pittsburgh at the time, in 6th grade, girls were only allowed to wear slacks on snow days.
Yes.
And so I thought that was so unfair. So I organized a protest. And we were going to, well, protest was very popular at the time. I organized a protest during lunch hour, so it would be perfectly legal. We had our placards, we had our signs that girls should be allowed to wear pants. And so it wasn't covered in the school newspaper. And I thought it was, oh my gosh, this is the biggest thing since pizza in the lunchroom. How dare you not cover our little protest? So I marched into the English teacher who's in charge of the school newspaper, and I was very indignant. And I said, how dare you not cover our protest? It's the biggest thing that happened this week. It was a weekly newsletter. And she said, well, if you're so smart, why don't you work on the paper? And I said, well, I will. And so then I started writing for the school paper, and a sassy little reporter was born. And I've never wanted to do anything else since.
I started in high school working on the school newspaper. It was a great way to get started in journalism. And I also was working for the radio station, giving the morning announcements. How have you reinvented yourself? Let's talk about reinvention for a little bit. How have you reinvented? Any particular areas that you've reinvented yourself?
I kind of think of it more like an evolution.
Okay.
You know, I think that we're constantly evolving, and as we grow, we become more seasoned. And I look at it that way because I find that maybe if you met me 10 years ago, I may have had a perspective that is infinitely different than the 10 years forward where you see me now. Today, I'm a lot more patient, I think, than I was 10 years ago. Now I can wait for a thing. I have the patience to wait for it. 10 years ago, I may not have been as patient. Maybe 10 years ago, I was tapping my toe. Right now, I can wait for it and then stop and smell the flowers a little bit and enjoy the moment. I'm more of the kind of person who can enjoy that moment right now and hear the rustling of the trees and smell the air, because I do think that each moment is precious. And 10 years ago, I didn't have the patience for that precious moment. You know, and I think that comes with time, where you know that each second is to be appreciated.
I think so. What would you say to the woman who is evolving now as she has become a second act woman and she wants to do something different, but she's either afraid or she doesn't even know how to get there? What would you tell her?
Find that thing that you really like to do. You know, I know a lot of women who really love doing stuff, and they don't know that they can turn that thing that they love to do into something that could be commerce. You know, let's say that you are the best cook and everybody loves what you cook. How can you turn that into something of profit? Or let's say that you're that person who manages well for everyone else. How can you take that managing skill and turn that into commerce? I mean, everybody's good at something.
At something, that's right.
Everyone is. And you know what? We fail to understand what we do well. And if you take a step back, you can ask your friends. You can say, Benita, what am I good at? When you look at me and you experience me, what are the positive things that you see that I do that I might be able to do well in my second act?
Now, where's that dog of yours?
It was Scrappy.
That dog was somewhere. Where?
Scrappy. 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 Come on. Come on, Scrappy. Scrappy. Scrappy, I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad to see you.
What's on your bucket list? What's next? What's next?
Well, I chalked one off when I was in that film, Fred and Bama, where I did a little acting, jazz hands. So, and so that was one. And then I have always wanted to write a book. And at first I had a working title, which is now dated. I wanted to call it As the Videotape Turns. But of course there's no videotape anymore.
That's right.
So we have to come up with a new title, Benita. But I do want to talk about it in first person, about journalism and how it's changed over the years, and also take snippets from how I started out in 1976 to present day, and many of the world events that I've witnessed over those years, and put it all down and write that book. So I want to write that book, and then after that book, I want to write another book.
Now, do you think the way you were raised impacted your worldview, how you see the world overall?
I think so. I think so. I think my parents, and if you talk about lessons learned, one of the greatest lessons I've learned would have to be that people in your life are much more than who they are to you. And I think as children, it's natural and normal to make the mistake of thinking that your parents' lives began when yours did. And you think of them one-dimensionally, this man is my father, this woman is my mother, and you don't, until you get older and have the benefit of time and experience, start even having an appropriate amount of interest in how did you grow up? What did you go through? You know, so as I get older and I learn more and more and more, you know, my parents both worked very hard and are self-made successes, and I think that does, you know, from an early age, we never were spoiled or felt like things should come easy, and both my parents valued hard work and continuing to try, and I think it definitely shaped my worldview until my worldview was literally shaped by the Navy, because it was a happy childhood and a great upbringing, but some struggles began right about, I would say, high school and then with college. I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder at 39.
Wow.
But only after, you know, starting to have a really hard time in school, and I actually failed out of college and joined the Navy as an alternative, which worked out very well, and worked for Armed Forces Radio and Television, and that's how I got into commercial TV.
Everybody's not going to go the traditional route of life. Go to high school, go to college, get married, have some kids. It's finding your own way and finding out who you really are. But when did you find out you had an aptitude, a ability, a skill for journalism?
I think pretty much the first opportunity I had to kind of perform, because like a lot of kids with attention deficit, you know, it's not always a bad thing. We're very creative. We're very spontaneous. We do very, very well under pressure. You know, the problem is when we have a lot of time to do things and a lot of tasks to do, and we have to decide when to do them, you know, it's a struggle. But we almost need some pressure to perform at our best. So when I got into that environment, I suddenly started to shine. And it was great. Plus I've always been very curious and interested in other people, so it was a great fit, and it was a big adventure. I had a wonderful time in the Navy. I mean, people ask if it helped my career, and I say no. It didn't help. It didn't help my career. It is the single reason, 100%, that I went on to have the career that I did.
What would you say that one or two of the most important life lessons that you've learned based on some of the things maybe that we've talked about?
I would say 43 still feels very early to say, you know, what a life lesson is, but I think the biggest is to just wait until things have completely played out before you decide whether they were good or bad. Just wait until things have played out, and again, remember that people are more than who they are to you.
Any regrets of the path that you've chosen? Any regrets? Would you do it the same way? Would you do it differently?
Well, it's hard to answer whether I would do things the same way, because so much of those pivotal things that happened were just things that happened that I guess I had a choice about how I responded to them. When I look back at, you know, how I ended up in the Navy and how I ended up in broadcasting and, you know, how I ended up able to do a lot of things, there's just a lot of really good luck and timing there. So I don't know how much I really did. One regret I have is I wish when I was in the Navy and was living overseas, I wish I traveled more in my downtime when I was stationed overseas. I wish I had taken advantage of the culture because it was, you know, 1992 to 1997, relatively peaceful time. It was a safer time to be abroad. Americans were very well received, and I wish I had taken more opportunity to really explore other parts of the world while I was there. I wish I had documented more of my life and journaled more and taken more pictures, but I was a journalist documenting what was going on with the Navy and then with other people. So I wish I had documented more, because I'm starting to forget.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Cheryl, thank you so much for inviting us into your beautiful home.
Thank you.
This is fantastic. And of course, you know, we're going to be talking about self-reflections, lessons learned, what would I tell my younger self? So you mentioned that you wanted to perhaps be a teacher or business, but how did you get into journalism then?
It's a funny story because I went to the University of Virginia and I started out as a business major and then I switched to English, and that was my true love. It was writing. I worked for the school newspaper, I worked for the school radio station, and I thought maybe that's what I'll do. I didn't really know. And at the radio station, it was actually not affiliated with the school, it was a community radio station, but there was a connection through an internship program with UVA. The news director there, she said to me, I think you should try television. And I said, no, you know, I really don't have any desire, I don't have the skills even. And we didn't have a journalism department at UVA, we still don't. And I said, okay, I thought about it a little bit, and she kept pushing it. And I said, okay, I trusted her.
Yeah.
And because she saw something in me, I decided to pursue it. And I gave myself a deadline. I said, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to do something else. I'll continue in radio maybe, work for a newspaper. It was tough after I graduated. It was another recession, and it was tough for grads to get jobs at that time. So I left UVA and I got a job at a newspaper. It was an internship, so I could figure out what I was doing and try and get work at a television station. And that's what I did. So I wrote for the newspaper in Fredericksburg, and I just tried to get news internships at television stations throughout the area. And I did. I worked behind the scenes at a cable station in Rockville, Maryland. I worked behind the scenes at a TV station in Richmond, and that's where I stayed for a little while I made a tape. A resume tape, which I did not have.
Yes.
I did not know how to make one. I did not know what went into it. I had no idea how to write to video. I had no knowledge of any of this, and it was so foreign to me, but it was exciting.
Yes.
As you know,
yes,
television is exciting.
Oh, it is so exciting. I
And
love it.
I remember going out on my first overnight call with a reporter, and it gets in your blood, and then you want it. Yes. So I worked overnight and I worked weekends, and I made a tape in my spare time, working with reporters and photographers at the station, and I sent it out. I did what you do. I tried to get my first job in television, and I had to go away from home in order to do it. My first job was in Macon, Georgia. They had a startup Fox affiliate, and the news director saw my tape, which was terrible, but he hired me, and growing up in Northern Virginia, it was a little bit of a shock. We didn't know anybody in Georgia, but my parents came with me to visit Macon, and they were scared, of course, for me, because it was something completely foreign, something new, something different, and a new job to boot.
Yes.
But they gave their blessing, and I was there in Macon for 3 years, and I was starting out as a one-man band, which means I shot, I wrote, I edited the pieces that went on the air. And from there moved up to weekend anchor, and then I became the main anchor before I left. Left Macon and then went to Richmond, Virginia, back to the station where I worked behind the scenes, and I became the weekend anchor there. And then from there, came here to Virginia Beach.
I love it.
Yeah.
Cheryl, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
I so enjoyed you. Everybody has someone in their life that has influenced them to become the person they are right now. And for me, it was my mom and dad.
Oh, how beautiful. And then this one was in New York City.
Now this is amazing.
We had a brownstone and a little balcony, and so that was, I was maybe...
That goes back to what you told me about the family that you came from and how you grew up. That looks like a happy person.
Oh,
I mean, honestly, she looks happy. She looks adjusted. She looks loved. And I don't just say that, I mean that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
That is so wonderful. And it does matter. You talk about the journey, but that part of the journey when we're little and we are growing and so forth, what we internalize, what we are taught, but what we are caught as well. And so that's so exciting to see that kind of stuff.
Thank you for sharing your life with us.
Oh, no, thank
This
you
is
for
a part of your life.
What would I tell my younger self?
I would tell my younger self to live your life for Jesus Christ. And then, as we were sharing just a moment ago, as far as young people choosing careers, I would tell them to choose their career based on whatever their gifts and talents are. Too many people get in careers 10, 20, 30 years later and they're miserable. So I would tell a young person, you know, when they're looking for a career, you know, what is it you're good at? What are your gifts, your talents?
I would tell my younger self to always continue to get education. No matter how much schooling you get, there's always room for more. You can always be learning life lessons, you know, family lessons, work, everything. There's always room for growth.
Save money. If you can't afford it, don't buy it, so don't get any credit cards. Finish anything that you start. Be kind to others and treat people the way you want to be treated. Stick to what you're going to start and finish it, because in this life there's no path that's going to be just a breeze or just a walk in the park. You're going to have to climb some hills and dig out of some holes sometime, but you have to stick to what you're going to start.
I tell you, I learned so much from Barbara and Cheryl and Carrie. And I learned what I tell people all the time: it's never too late to become the person you were meant to be. Now, I've learned a lot of things from my younger self, lessons learned, and I have to realize that, you know what, change is scary and it's exciting, but as we're walking through this midlife journey of transformation and reinvention, I have to say, it is never too late. So let's not be afraid to reset our lives, because remember, girls, it's our time.